At my mother's birthday dinner, I made a joke about my husband and watched the light disappear from his eyes.
My name is Melissa, and for years I truly believed my husband Jason was unshakable, calm, steady, and completely unbothered. He was the kind of man who let storms pass without flinching, who smiled through awkward moments, and who chose peace over pride every single time. He was my rock. And maybe that's why I pushed him too far. I honestly thought he wouldn't break. It all came to a head at my mother's 60th birthday dinner. Picture this, a long wooden table decorated with candles and flowers, my entire family buzzing with stories, laughter, and that chaotic energy that only comes with a little too much wine. Jason had been a saint all day. He helped everyone set up, he poured drinks, he carried trays, and made sure my mom's night was absolutely perfect. He always did the quiet things, you know? The things no one ever claps for, except me, or at least I used to. After dessert, the conversation veered into the topic of romantic gestures. My mom's friends started bragging about weekend getaways and surprise jewelry. Then someone turned to Jason and asked what he considered romantic. He just shrugged, smiling politely. "I make her coffee every morning," he said. "That's love in my language." A few people chuckled softly, and then I spoke. God, I wish I had stayed silent. But the wine, the spotlight, the pressure to be funny, it all twisted into something careless. I laughed, a little too loudly, and said, "Oh, please." Jason's idea of romance is remembering our anniversary because Facebook reminds him. The table erupted, everyone laughed, hard, way too hard. And for the first time in 10 years of loving this man, I watched his smile completely vanish, like a candle flame blown out in an instant. He didn't glare at me. He didn't snap. He didn't pull me aside. He just looked at me calm, unreadable, but with a glint in his eyes I had never ever seen before. He placed his napkin down on the table, sat back in his chair, and said, "Funny you mention reminders. Because if Facebook ever stops telling you you're married to me, I'm not sure you'd remember either." Silence, absolute, deafening silence. The entire table froze. Someone literally dropped their fork. Even the background music suddenly felt abrasive and loud. My chest tightened until it hurt. "Jason," I whispered, but he didn't look at me again. Not once for the rest of the night. The rest of the dinner felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. The ride home was even worse. He didn't say a single word. The streetlights cut across his face in flashes, like tiny bursts of truth I desperately didn't want to see. When we finally pulled into our driveway, he turned off the car and faced me. His expression was terrifyingly composed. "Do you ever get tired of turning me into the joke?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Because I'm exhausted being the one who always has to laugh it off." There was no anger, no volume. Just truth, deep, unfiltered, heartbreaking truth. And in that moment I realized my jokes weren't jokes at all. They were cracks. Years of small, careless cuts that I had brushed off as just being playful. But I finally understood. Humor that humiliates isn't humor. It's cruelty disguised as charm. And I had crossed that line far, far too often. The next morning, Jason made coffee just like he always did. 2 cups, one for him, one for me. He slid my cup across the counter without looking up. Routine had never felt so heartbreaking. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, my mind racing, trying to find the right words. "Jay, about last night," I started. He cut me off, but gently. "I'm not angry, Mel, and that scared me more than any amount of rage ever could have. I just realized," he continued quietly, his eyes fixed on the steam rising from his cup, "that I've let you chip away at me for a long time. One joke at a time." My throat tightened. All I wanted to do was reach out and touch him, to close the distance between us. But as I moved my hand forward, he took a small step back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't harsh. It was just enough to tell me he wasn't ready to be touched. For the next 2 days, our house was filled with a strange kind of quiet. It wasn't cold or hostile. It was just distant. He still held the door open for me. He still asked if I wanted tea. He even folded the blanket I'd left on the couch. He was still kind, but all the warmth was gone from his voice. His eyes never lingered on me anymore. His presence felt polite, not loving, and that absence of emotional warmth. It felt like sleeping next to a ghost. It was lonelier than any argument we'd ever had. On the third evening, I knew I had to do something. I decided to fix it. I cooked his favorite meal, rosemary steak with buttery mashed potatoes, and I lit candles, just like we used to on date nights. When Jason walked in from work, he paused in the doorway, a look of confusion on his face. "Dinner?" he asked softly. "It's a peace offering," I whispered back. He nodded slowly, took a seat at the table, and for a fleeting moment I almost believed things could go right back to normal. But halfway through the meal, the silence was too heavy. I finally said the words that had been sitting in my chest for days. "I hurt you." He didn't deny it. He didn't minimize it. He just looked at me and his eyes seemed too tired for a man his age. "It's not just the joke, Mel," he said. "It's the pattern. Every single time you feel insecure or you're in the spotlight, you make me small to make yourself feel big." That truth just shattered me. "I didn't mean to," I started, but he cut me off again, his voice still quiet. "That," he said, "is the worst part. You didn't even realize you were doing it." My eyes filled with tears. "I can change," I pleaded. "I want to." He stood up, picked up his plate, and said gently, "Change for you, Mel, not for me. Because I can't be the man you shrink whenever you want to shine." He walked upstairs without another word. And I just stayed there, at that beautifully set table, staring at the flickering candle, finally realizing that I had mistaken his incredible patience for something it was never meant to be: endless tolerance. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I didn't make a joke. I didn't hide behind sarcasm. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I went online and I wrote a post not for attention but for accountability. It said, "Humor shouldn't hurt the people we love." For a long time, I made my husband the punchline. Last night I learned that respect isn't optional in a relationship, it's essential. I didn't tag him. I didn't even tell him I'd posted it, but he saw it. Within an hour, a comment from him appeared. It said, "I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for a partnership. Let's build each other up, not perform for each other." I cried reading it. Not because it felt like forgiveness, but because it felt so true. He wasn't just letting me off the hook. He was showing me the way forward. That evening, I found him on the back porch, just watching the sunset. His posture was calm, his face was soft. He didn't look angry or distant anymore, but somewhere between hurt and hopeful. I sat down beside him, my heart pounding. "I didn't expect you to reply," I whispered. Jason just shrugged gently. "I didn't expect you to understand," he said. "But you did." We sat there in silence for a long time, but it wasn't the painful silence from before. It was the kind of quiet where two people are finally breathing at the same rhythm again. Finally, I reached for his hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "For every single time I made you feel small." He squeezed my fingers. "And I'm sorry," he said, looking at me, really looking at me, for the first time in days, "for letting you think I'd stay quiet forever." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. And then mine too. Because we both knew something profound had shifted. Respect isn't built in grand, romantic gestures. It's built in the small, everyday moments where we choose kindness over our ego and truth over performance. That night didn't magically fix everything, but it rebuilt something far more important: mutual regard, mutual honesty, mutual presence. And in that quiet on the porch, Jason wasn't the man I joked about at dinner. He was the man who taught me that love survives not through humor, but through humility. Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more stories about love, life, and learning the hard way. See you next time.